Well, as you folks know, I am a huge dog lover, as are many of you. And I wrote a book, Rescuing Sprite. Sprite was a shelter dog, and I talk about my beloved Pepsi in there, as well as my beloved Griffey. And now I have my beloved Barney. There was a column, I almost dread getting into this, but I have to, written by Jonah Goldberg in, I believe it was USA Today, really doesn't matter. And this is extremely troublesome, so I'm hoping you'll increase the volume and focus on this just for a moment. It says, we've all heard the expression, a man's best friend is his equipment. Well, you haven't? You must not work for the Pentagon. Their military dogs are considered mere equipment, and as such can be left behind when the troops come home. It's a bit more complicated than that. Military dogs are enlisted, drafted actually, to identify enemy locations, seek out bombs, and protect bases. It's dangerous, often traumatic work. The dogs are credited with saving countless U.S. and Allied lives, which is why the Taliban actively targets our dogs of war. And while on active service, each dog is given a higher rank than its handler. That is, right up until the moment these dogs are, quote-unquote, retired. Once they're too old, too shell-shocked, or simply not needed, the dogs are automatically declared equipment, quote-unquote, that can be left behind like a latrine tent. The military sometimes says they are retired and become civilians, but the result is the same because these civilians don't have a right to military transport home. They're left there, ladies and gentlemen, on the battlefield or in these shelters there. While there is a proper legal classification for a working dog, we know they are living things and we have great respect and admiration for them. Jerry Proctor, a spokesman for Lackland Air Force Base, which trained military dogs, told CNN, a handler would never speak of their dog as a piece of equipment. The dog is their partner. You can walk away from a damaged tank, but you can't from your dog. Never. If you ever talk to a military dog handler, or even you simply had a dog, odds are you know the obvious truth of this. If you still need convincing, watch the 2013 Animal Planet documentary about U.S. war dogs in Afghanistan, Glory Hounds, to see not merely how vital these animals are, but also how powerful the bond between the handler and his canine comrades is. But that trust often goes unrewarded. It's one thing to ask these warriors to say goodbye to their dog when it's still on active duty and is assigned to a new handler, which often happens. It's quite another to ask them to leave these dogs behind when the dogs are effectively abandoned overseas, left to languish in shelters, or worse. That's why handlers are sometimes forced to make incredible sacrifices to get their four-legged comrades home on their own. Organizations such as the United States War Dog Association and the American Humane Association do heroic work to reunite them when possible at no taxpayer expense. Legislation pushed by Representative Walter Jones, Republican North Carolina, that would require military dogs to be retired only upon return to the U.S., has been languishing in Congress for years. Politically and morally, it's understandable that top priority must be given to providing human veterans with adequate care, particularly amid the horrific Veterans Affairs scandals plaguing the Obama administration. No politician wants to be accused of caring more about dogs than people, but that's really a false choice. The cost of finding room on military transports is negligible, according to many. Private organizations can handle the rest, even if it did come at some additional cost. So what? Going by simple cost-benefit analysis, the military wouldn't go to such great lengths to retrieve the bodies of fallen soldiers or protect the American flag, and yet it does. Why? Because everyone understands that such obligations are morally required and vital to morale. There are those who consider our military working dogs to be pieces of gear, Farrell says in Glory Hounds. I, for one, do not believe that at all. To try to remove your heart from the situation is really asking too much of a handler. And folks, not just the handlers. Jonah Goldberg, I had no idea this was going on. Those dogs should come home. They shouldn't be left to roam the streets, to be killed by the enemy, to be mistreated, to be abused, to starve to death. I never knew this was going on, and Pentagon policy really does need to change. No, I don't think we should risk one human being and their life, but we're not talking about that. Those dogs should come home. And I know members of Congress listen to this program, It's time to get behind this Walter Jones bill. I'm no fan of Walter Jones, but I'm a fan of this bill, and I'm a fan of him promoting it. Let's do it. Let's bring them home. How about Frank in New Jersey, the great WABC? Go!
Hey, Mr. Levin, how you doing?
All right.
Quite honestly, I've been involved in sending stuff over to Afghanistan and Iraq for the military war dog handlers and their dogs since approximately 2008, after I hooked up with Ron Aiello of U.S. War Dogs here in New Jersey. They do not leave the military war dogs in combat situations in hostile areas anymore. That was stopped after President Clinton signed an executive order.
I don't think they're saying they necessarily leave them in combat areas.
Right.
They say they leave them behind.
Well, they will leave them behind if they are adopted. If they're retired over in say Germany. Say if they're retired in Germany.
But you got to listen to me. What they're saying is they're leaving them behind. They go into these rotten shelters, or they do wind up roaming the streets, or they don't know what actually happens to them.
Yeah, well, I guess that is a possibility, but I've never heard of that as far as them leaving behind like that. A lot of times they confuse them with the contracting working dogs that the government contracts out. But as far
Let me put it to you this way. That's interesting, too. I don't care whether they're contracted out or not. We should bring them all home.
Yes, we should. I 100% agree with you, and we've been trying to get that passed for years.
So hold on. So your organization's been working on that?
Not necessarily mine. I'm a subsidiary. I started my organization based on what Ron Aiello from U.S. War Dogs started.
All right. So what's that website?
It would be U.S. War Dogs.
uswardogs.org, uswardogs.org, correct?
Yes, and his name is Ron Aiello. He's a former Vietnam war dog handler.
Excellent. Well, thank you and him for what you're doing. God bless you. Yep, I never knew anything about all this, and now we do. And as Joni Goldberg pointed out in his column, there are wonderful private groups working on this. But as he also pointed out, there's a lot of dogs that are being left behind. I just think it's ridiculous. And if we have room to bring them home, we ought to be bringing them home. David in Wyoming. Go right ahead, sir.
Mr. Levin, The honor is all mine. I am a military working dog handler in the Ranger Regiment, and this article shocks me. It's hard to believe we would never leave one of our dogs in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. But apparently it's widespread. You hadn't heard of this?
No, sir.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you're an Army Ranger?
That's right, I am.
That means you're a pretty tough guy.
Tougher than most.
Well, I want to salute you and thank you. And I have a couple of friends who, who work with dogs in the police department in New Jersey.
Yes, sir.
And Vinny and Dave, as a matter of fact, and they would never leave their dogs in harm's way. Never, ever.
No, I can't talk for the rest of the regular Army, but in Ranger Regiment, these animals cost tens of thousands of dollars. Not only are they vital to the mission, but we do get attached to them.
Well, why don't they allow, military personnel who train them and live with them and do get attached with them to take them home?
I don't understand, sir. There is the accountability issue we have. We need to keep them, in the Ranger compound where they're secure, but that's why they can't just go home.
Yeah. All right, David. Thank you. God bless you. David in Wyoming.